this, a friend of mine who is an artist and a weaver and an author, and she also makes her bread and yogurt. So there's nothing that she can't do. So we'll turn the time over to Ginny.
Thank you, Sue. Okay. Yat she Ginny Sparks inishya tro head lini inishla tro hanna bashashin tro the eatni dashache sana Ginny dashanala what got in it sanishla. I just greeted you in my native language, which is Navajo, and that is my primary language. I didn't learn English until I would say I was between probably 7, 8 years old. And when I started school, for the Diné people, which is what we call ourselves, we're Diné. Navajo was given to us by other people, but we do answer to it. And so when you introduce yourself in Navajo, it is more than just giving your name. It is so much more than that. It is telling someone where you're from, where you live. But it's more than that too. It's not the location of where you live. It's more about what defines you. So this comes from our clans. And the clans are something that is very complicated. Even I myself don't know all the clans. We have over 100 clans in our tribe. It revolves around the word ke, and ke is kinship. And that is familial and also clan relationships. We might not be related, but if you tell me your clan and you're from the water clan, which I am, then we are related in that way. And you automatically become my sister, my aunt, my grandmother, my mother. So we have that friendship, that binds us together. We are a matrilineal society. Each person belongs to 4 clans. And so let me explain to you my 4 clans. So the very first clan is the mother's clan, and that is the most important clan. My mother's clan is Tuahiadlini, which means water that comes together. And so all of the children, all my siblings, my brothers, my sisters, we all belong to Tuahiadlini because we take the clan from our mother and we carry it forward. The second clan is my father's clan, and he is To'ahana, which means near water. And my maternal grandfather's clan is Totachitni, which is bitter water. So you can see I come from 3 water clans. And so my 4th one is my paternal grandfather, which is Sanajini, which means the black streak wood people. And so the way that our clan system is structured is that the mother's clan will always be cared for because of her children. Like I said, we're matrilineal, so the clans go through the mother, and it stays. Whereas the father's clan, it cycles out after 2 generations. So we are an oral-based society. We didn't have a written language, but we have a very complicated language. I understand that it is very difficult to speak. Haven't it be my primary language, I would not be able to judge if it was or it wasn't. That's the first language I learned. And so being from an oral society, our stories are about our people, it's about our clans and how we view the world. It's passed from generation to generation. And I heard the story of my birth from my mother and my grandmother. So this past year, I made it a point to write down some of the stories from my childhood because, after I'm gone, my children are not going to know. My grandchildren are not going to know. I am the last generation to speak fluently the Navajo language. I did not teach my children, which is a great sorrow to me, but I will get into that, why I didn't teach my children. But my grandchildren, I am teaching. So we skipped a generation, but they're learning. Okay. So I've been writing down stories for my kids, and I'm going to build it into a little thing for Christmas for them. But I did start a children's book series called Sunflower Girl. And these are all stories about myself as a young child growing up on the Navajo Indian Reservation. So the first one is called Grandmother and the Bull. So we talk about my grandmother, which is this cute little lady right here. She was tiny, but she was fierce, and you did not cross her. Okay. So I will just read to you from what I've written so far for my kids. My name is Nidiyiliat Ed, or Sunflower Girl. My mother told me as long as my memory can recall, I was born when the sunflowers were in full bloom. A vibrant collage of yellow petals with deep brown faces, blanketing the red rolling hills and the rocky desert terrain. They had been nourished by the summer rainstorms and now growing wild and free, their faces reaching to the sun and basking in its warmth, the last reminder of Indian summer coming to an end. I don't know the exact date of my birth nor the year. She says I was born before the dawn, when the morning star was still hanging in the sky. I was born in the harsh and unforgiving environment of the Navajo Indian Reservation in northern Arizona. I greeted the world screaming with just my mother and my grandmother present. So in my first children's book, I did the illustrations also, and this is a depiction of me being born. So the circumstances of my birth are still being relived by mothers and babies that are living in third world countries where childbirth and sanitation do not always converge. The nearest medical facility was too far away. There was no transportation to take a poor pregnant Native American woman delivering her 11th child. I was number 11. Whoops. Her daughter would be born as those before her in the bosom of Mother Earth with a strong, resilient mother and a new life repeating itself since the beginning of time. My grandmother, Sosie, acted as the midwife and swiftly moves to cut the umbilical cord with the efficiency of a midwife and swiftly moves, well-versed in her role. Her movements are fluid and her presence radiates calmness. She reaches for a cotton cloth that had once been a bluebird flour sack and wraps me up tight and places me on a blanket on the bare ground. She turns to help her daughter, my mother, deliver the placenta and places the bloody tissue in a blue speckled enamel bowl. Speak louder. Okay, sorry. I tend to be very soft-spoken anyway, unless I'm yelling at somebody. Like doctors, okay? Okay. My mother, tired and spent from laboring all night long, picks me up and unfolds me in her arms. And the soft glow of the morning light, she greets me in Navajo and welcomes me. Both women turn to the east as the first rays peek over the valley, announcing the beginning of a new day. My grandmother takes a corn pollen, which she keeps tucked in the waistband of her full-length cotton skirt, and sprinkles it to the four directions of the earth, east, south, west, and north. And then she prays to the Great One that gave us all life, and then created every living thing on the earth and in the universe. After completing her prayer, she turns her attention to the organ in the enamel bowl. The placenta and umbilical cord, now lifeless, needs to be buried under a tree, preferably a pinon or a juniper tree. This would ensure that the tissue that came from my mother and had nourished her baby for 9 months would be given back to Mother Earth and complete the circle of life. The gift given back to Mother Earth would also connect me with her connection that would never be broken. Mother Earth was the first to touch my body, for I was born on the bare desert floor and will be the last to receive me when I pass from this life. In the Navajo culture, bearing the placenta also binds the baby to the land of her birth. To those who are unfamiliar with Native culture, This might seem ritualistic and bizarre, but no stranger than cultures that do circumcisions or sprinkle babies when they're baptized. When a child grows into adulthood, a Navajo child, and wherever the path may take them, they will always remember the land of their birth and return. I am Dene, I am of the land. This always touches me. This land is sacred to us, and we are connected to her physically and spiritually because she is our mother and she nourishes us. Dene is what we call ourselves, and it means the people. The name Navajo was given to us by others, and though we acknowledge the name, it doesn't have the same meaning or resonance as Dene. It is not what we call ourselves. So our family home was at the base of the Black Mesa Mountains, and I don't know if you are familiar with Navajo country, but it is big. It's about the size of West Virginia, and scattered everywhere from Willamette Valley, the low desert, to the higher desert, where we have mountains and pine forests and lakes and meadows and valleys. So we have a very diverse landscape. And so in the town that we lived, it was called Chilchimbito. And the roads to our town, it was not paved yet, so everything was dirt road when I was little. And it was very rough, and the only vehicles that could make it or dared to drive on were the pickup trucks. And it was almost like driving on what I would imagine an aluminum washboard. I don't know if some of you are probably too young to remember that. But as a child, I remember having to help my mother wash clothes, and there was that aluminum board that we used before washing machines were available, okay? And so pickup trucks were really the only ones that could go over the dirt roads. People still rode horses, and even wagons that were pulled by horses. I remember that as a child. You have to forgive me, my mouth is getting dry. So we lived. When I was a child, I remember feeling very small. There was so much wide open space around me, and the sky was enormous, blue and white, and endless sunshine. We lived in a high desert elevation, and there was very little rain. The winters were cold with snow. The summers were hot, and the monsoons came late in the summer. And it was a joyful time because that was a time when we were able to play in the rain and the water, the mud, all the things that children like to do, and also helped sustain our family garden. We grew corn, squash, melon, beans, and my father started a peach orchard. So I only have one picture of me as a young child, probably between 2 and 3, and it's this one right here, and you can just barely see it, and it's all smudged and everything. But I remember my older brother came back from school, and he had a camera, and we had never really seen a camera before, so that was pretty exciting. And so my mother thought that I should have my picture taken. So she dressed me up and did my hair and everything, but I was not in a good mood. I don't know why. I was mad. So I promptly went outside and played in the dirt. And I took my hands and I went like this to my hair. So as you can see in the picture, my hair is all askew, and I'm not smiling. I'm not happy. So if I would have known later on how important that photo was going to be, I would have smiled. So, and how fortunate I was, because I was one of very few of the 15 kids that was able to have a picture taken when we were small. The rest of us never did have a picture of them. I'm going to read you a little bit more about my childhood. Life was good when I was a child. I didn't know poverty was ever present around us and that other people lived differently than we did. We didn't have running water nor electricity. My world revolved around my grandmother, my mother, my father, my siblings, our goats, our sheep, our dogs, and our horses. I knew I was loved, even though it was very seldom spoken. Children seem to be endowed with the gift of knowing if they are loved. It is a tangible intuition that can be felt just as strongly as hate. We lived in a very peaceful existence until my father had to leave the reservation to find work. This disrupted our sense of family. He found work as a laborer for the Santa Fe Railroads and was away for long periods of time. He traveled all over the western states doing his job. Along the way, he picked up some English and Spanish enough to provide comfort in communicating with his co-workers. He braved the outside world to provide for his family. And if you want to put that into perspective, how would you like to go to a different country where you don't know the language, and yet you had to find a job, and you had to find a way to support your family? This is what my father did, and I admire him for that. When I think back on my childhood, what strikes me most is the simplicity of my life. There were few distractions, and my choices were simple. We woke up when the sun came up, worked and went to bed when the sun went down. There were no clocks to demand our time, only the position of the sun in the sky to determine what needed to be done next. I had siblings to play with, and we seldom went hungry. We did not have toys from the store to entertain us, fascinate us, or distract us. We used our imagination and designed our own games and played with what was around us. Nature provided a wonderful playground. Rocks could become marbles. Flowers turned upside down would become women in beautiful, colorful dresses. I had an older brother who was very gifted in creating things from nature that nature provided. He used the clay we found in the foothills while we were herding sheep. He would gather the clumps, and then we'd grind it down until it was about the consistency of cornstarch. We'd add a little bit of water, and it would become our Play-Doh. And it was very pliable and soft. So he would use that to create animals. And he would get a sharp stick, and he would use that to define the features on the things that he created. So many happy and carefree hours were spent playing with our miniature clay animals and the families that he made. Okay, that was my childhood up till probably when I was 7 years old. It was magical, it was carefree, it was wonderful, and then things changed. I don't know how many of you know about the Indian boarding schools that were set up by the U.S. government. Well, it affected us. Our job as children was to herd sheep. And we didn't have any water nearby, so we had to take our sheep and our goats to a windmill, which was probably about 5 miles away. It seemed a lot longer when I was young, but we had to take them there every other day so they could have water to drink. And so the U.S. government set up this boarding school system, and the main goal of that was to take Native children and place them into these schools to basically assimilate them into the Anglo culture. They didn't want us to speak our language. They didn't want us to know our culture. It was basically just kind of an erasure of our whole culture. And these schools were very abusive. Sometimes they were run by Christian organizations, and sometimes not. It just depends on where you were. And they were both here in the United States and in Canada. And so I was one of those children along with my siblings. And in the summer of 1961 or somewhere in that region, I was out herding sheep with my older brother Ron. He's 2 years older than me. And this white van that said BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs, written on the side of it, drove up, and they forced us into the van. We had no choice. We didn't speak English. We didn't know what they were saying to us, but they forced us in there, and so basically kidnapped us. And we're taken to a boarding school about 35 miles away, and that trauma has never, ever left me. We were separated once we got to the school. My brother went to the boys' dormitory. I was sent to the girls. And my long hair was cut off. My head was doused in kerosene. They thought that all Native kids had head lice. The clothes that we wore, what I was wearing, was disposed of. We were forced into a group shower, and they scrubbed us down with lye soap and a bristle brush. And I just remember how painful that was. Afterwards, we were given these ugly uniforms, very similar to the military, and we were forced to live in cold dormitories where it very seldom was warm in the wintertime. We followed the regiment of a military school. We were marched everywhere. We did not speak unless we were spoken to, and if we were caught speaking our native language, we were beaten physically. And we were watched very carefully. And then they lined us up like little soldiers and assigned us a religion based on what churches were available in that town. They went down the row and they would tap you on the head and they would say, you're Catholic, you're Mormon, you're Seventh-day Adventist, you're Presbyterian, and there was one more. I can't remember what that was. But I ended up being Catholic. So it was so strange to me that they thought that just giving us a religion was just like something so tangible. I had no concept of Christianity. It was a foreign concept to me, to all of us Native kids. It was not part of our Native culture. We have a belief, more of a spiritual belief in the deity and there's numerous deities that we talk to or pray to. And the thought of a God and Jesus Christ and all that was not something that was in our culture. All of this was very dehumanizing, and it's something that I will never, ever forget. And as far as I know, the U.S. government has never apologized for the conditions that they placed us with and what they did to us. But there were some positive aspects about it. One was that I got to meet 2 African American teachers. They were highly educated women from the South, but they were not able to find employment in the South because this is in the 60s. There was segregation, there was all kinds of political upheaval going on at that time, and a lot of prejudice. And so the only place that they could find to teach was on the Indian reservation. And so as soon as they saw that I was very, I'm going to call myself very bright, okay? I picked up the language very fast. I was reading, very soon. And they could see that. I think teachers can spot, which student is just a little bit more advanced than the others. And so they said to me, and there's something I will never forget, and they said, to get out of poverty, you have to get an education. And so I ran with it, and I never looked back. I got a scholarship in nursing. I went to college. I became a nurse. I worked in the operating room for 40 years. I've worked all over the United States. And I retired 5 years ago. So, you know a little bit about my background now. And my husband and I moved here in 1992. We lived in Page before I graduated and worked in Salt Lake City for 13 years, and then we moved down to Mesa for 5 years, and then we moved to Page for 5 years, and then we moved here. And then after all the kids graduated, I decided I wanted to do travel nursing. And so he sold his business, and he followed me, and we went all over, and I finally retired. We ended up in California for the last 15 years or so. And I got injured on the job, so I had to retire early. Coming back here, had back surgery, and things actually turned out pretty well. I don't have any more pain. So weaving has always been in my family. I am a 4th-generation weaver. Now, it was disrupted when I was placed into boarding school, and I only had 3 months in the summertime to go home. They wouldn't really let us go home during the school year. The kids that live close, their parents could come and they could take them out like for the weekend or something. But my parents didn't have transportation and they lived far away, so I basically spent my time 9 months out of the year in the boarding school system and went home in the summertime. And so I learned to weave by observing my mother. And even though my mother had 15 children, she was very short on patience, especially those of us that were towards the end, okay? And so when I would ask her questions, she wasn't exactly forthcoming. So she'd just say, you know, sit there and observe and see what I'm doing. And so that's kind of basically the way I learned. And so I'm the fourth generation, and my granddaughter, Briar, right here, she's 8 now, but I'm teaching her. She's the one, she's going to be the 5th generation weaver. So I'm very proud of that. I'm going to go back to our oral history. We believe that we as Danette emerged from 4 worlds. And there's kind of a controversy about whether it's 4 or 5 worlds. With oral tradition, sometimes a certain part of the reservation will believe certain things and another part will not, you know, will be different, okay? So the way I was taught was that we emerged from 4 worlds. And the first world was a black world. And the black world was where everything was dark. There was mist. There was only the air people that lived there. And then the next world was the blue world. Now the blue world was a little bit more advanced. There were blue animals that lived there, bluebirds and so forth. And then the yellow world came after that. Now we are in the 4th world, which is the glittering world. And the holy people, the people that are holy to us, gave life to Spider Woman and Spider Man, okay? So let me explain to you what that means. We're not talking about comic book characters, okay? We had the dibs on Spider Woman and Spider Man way before your culture did. So basically, Spider Woman she gave us the gift, the Danette people, the gift of weaving. And she was a very curious woman. She would observe everything in nature, and she wanted to see how things work. And she happened to spy a spider weaving, and so she kind of just observed and watched and came to the conclusion that, you know, she could do this. Plus, the holy people had given her the assignment to learn how to weave so she could imitate the universe and make a pattern for the universe. And her husband was Spider-Man, and he did the first loom for her. And so as you can see, our looms are vertical, like this. This is the rug that I'm currently working on. It's for my daughter. I've tried to weave a rug for all of my children. The next are the grandchildren, which I have 3 grandchildren. And then who knows, whoever else I feel like weaving for. So it's a vertical loom, like I said, and it has 2 sheds, okay? And we have everything in the Navajo environment is based on Ke, which is kinship, clan system, and also on how we view the world, which is through Hojon. Hojon is very difficult to describe because if you're a native speaker, Hojon, if somebody says Hojon to you, you know exactly what that means. But in English, when you try to decipher it, it just kind of gets lost. Like, okay, it's beauty, it's tranquility, it's so many things that go into living a well-balanced life is basically what it is. To be able to live like the Orientals, the yin, the yang, it's kind of that same thing where you want to live a life that will have beauty in your life, and you're able to incorporate those things that will help you have a good life. And so this top beam, everything in Navajo is male, female oriented. The top beam is the sky beam. That's male. The bottom beam, I guess it fell off, is the earth beam, okay, because it touches the earth. This is the female, because she's sitting on our Mother Earth. Over here on the left side is the female gravity. Male gravity, this is the male shed, female, and that represents rain. And this represents our rain, And between here, right here, are the cloud formations. This is where the clouds. So everything is basically geared towards nature and what we believe and how we try to live our life. And so I looked in, when I was going to school, there were a lot of things that irritated me. And part of that was the fact that they didn't really tell our history. Everything was geared towards the main culture, the Anglo culture. They didn't really write down, and I remember even in high school, the textbook still had savages in it. And I remember getting really upset at my history teacher. And he said, Ginny, if I could change it, I would change it right now. But obviously, and hopefully things have changed now. I mean, I haven't looked at a history book in high school in a long time. But the sheep has always been very sacred to us. And in the textbooks, they say the Spaniards introduced the sheep to us like in the 15th century or something. But in our culture, we've always had the sheep. It was a gift to us from the holy people. It's something that they gave to us because they knew that it would sustain us and it would help us. And so it's always been an integral part of our life. It's part of the Hojo, part of the living a balanced and harmonious life. We care for them and they care for us. And we use the wool for weaving. And we also use their bodies for food. It's our sustenance, our protein that we get from them. And their hide is also used for many different purposes. And even the sheep's skin, as a child, I remember we didn't sleep on mattresses. My grandmother would just pile a bunch of these sheepskin, and it's just made the best sleeping pallet to sleep on. And as a nurse, I noticed that they used the same concept that we did. They would use sheepskin for patients that would have sores, the bed sores. And so I thought, my grandmother knew that a long time ago. You're not putting anything new to us, So anyway, so wool prep. Once we have the sheep, a certain time of the season, they need to be sheared because summer's coming and it's going to be really hot and it's going to be a lot of wool that they grow over the winter. It's going to be heavy. So that's what we do. And it's a family affair. So everybody comes and they help you shear the sheep. And then after the sheep are sheared, then comes the cleaning. So preparation is long and hard, and so is the weaving. So, but at least you can just sit there and just kind of use your imagination and just weave, and then get up and go do something if you need to. But so after the shearing, then we do the cleaning, and the sheep are separated, the wool is separated into different piles. White wool on one side, the gray on the other, and the gray actually is like the black sheep and the white sheep. We put the wool together and we mix the colors, then it comes out gray. We also do the brown wool and sometimes just the plain black wool. And so after the separation, and sometimes a lot of them have like a lot of lanolin, so you kind of have to set them out for a day or so to let the lanolin kind of dry up before you use it. And then we would have like a big wash tub with soap, and we would use that to wash the wool, and then another tub to rinse the wool, and then we would put them out to dry. And after they were dried, then comes the carding part, which is, these are carders. Okay. So this is what my mother and my grandmother used, and I did for a little while, but then I started cheating. I got one of those carder drums that my friend I bought from her, and it goes so much faster. Okay, so let me show you how this works, okay? So you just put a little bit of wool on there. And then, let me see, I'm just going to turn this chair around. So I have to sit to do it. So you can see. And it's actually very relaxing because you can sit here and card and you can still talk to people. So you just kind of, and it lines all the fibers in one direction. So this is really very cool. Okay, it goes back like this, and you continue carding until you have all the fibers going in one direction. And then you have your little wool, what I call the wool burrito. So I just take it and I just start folding it like that. And see, it's ready to be spun now. And this is what I do until I have all my carding done. And then I start spinning. And these are my granddaughters. Aren't they cute? Yeah. So this is where you start the spinning. You take all of these Rolex and you put them together until you have them like this. And then this is called a Navajo spindle. And again, I'm kind of cheating too because I got an Ashford spinning wheel. And when I get proficient, I think it's going to be faster than doing this. So I'm trying to learn. So, and this is basically, when I weave, I like to use very fine yarn. So this is my yarn that I've made usually thinner than other yarns, than the commercial yarns. Okay, so that's what I use for probably my next project. I'm still working on this one. So basically, you just kind of very gently tease it out, and then when it gets to about this point, you just kind of twirl the spindle towards you, and you make the yarn. And then you just kind of go along, and you see some areas that are a little bit clumpier than others, and you just pick it off, and pretty soon you have a nice, smooth yarn. And so that's basically how we do the Navajo spindle. And it's basically just a thigh spindle, but it's made from very heavy wood and very sturdy, and it works great. I've never been able to master the drop spindle, and it's hard. That is hard, but this, a lot of people say it's hard too, but it just depends on what you learn, on what tool you learn on. And this is what my mother showed me and my grandmother, so this I'm very familiar with. Okay, so weaving a rug. Everybody has a specialty in various parts of the reservation. The part that I'm from, my mother wove 3 different styles. One was 2 gray heels. The second one was the Yei. So she was able to, and there are so many different kinds of rugs. But I kind of just took after, and this is like a pictorial. This is a pictorial. They basically weave a picture, like in a photograph. And I think I thought we had a pictorial there, but we don't. Okay. So you can look at some of the rugs. I'll pass these around. So after the carding and the spinning comes the dyeing. And the dyeing is very time consuming also. And a lot of times, depending what kind of rug that you're going to weave, a lot of them should just be from vegetational dye, not commercial dye. And so some of these are from that. This is indigo, which is a commercial dye. But this one is not. This is from Coreopsis, those yellow flowers that grow in your garden. My next door neighbor grows a lot of it, so she gives them to me at the end of the summer, and I weave some of my wool with the Coreopsis. And you can use all kinds of things. You can use sage, you can use tree bark, you can use just whatever that you can see out in the desert. How much time do I have? Oh, what did I do with my cards? That keep me on track. Okay, so finally the weaving comes. It's time to do the warping. And this is the warping where you actually start your loom. And that is really, really difficult. As much as I have been a weaver, I still make mistakes. And I have to go in my studio and I have to put my do not disturb sign on the door so the dog and the husband don't knock. And it takes me all day, and I have to have total concentration. Because if you make a mistake, it's either you start all over or you try and find some way to salvage it. And sometimes that's more trouble than it's worth. So anyway, and then when it starts the weaving process, I know that people, well, you use a lot of math, okay? I use more math weaving a rug than I did as an RN, okay, having to compute dosages and all kinds of medication, and I'm thinking, my mother and my grandmother did not go to a formal school. They didn't have the opportunity. And so I just think they were extremely bright to be able to figure it all in their heads, because we don't draw it out. We don't draw out how it's going to be done. It's all in here. Well, at least, okay, I cheat a little bit. I do draw the basic pattern of what I want, But you have to find the middle section of the rug and then kind of work your way to that. And then you have to know where your middle is going to be. So you have to find the middle vertically and horizontally, and then you start weaving from that process. And so I've already gone halfway. So now I got to go backwards so that it ends up looking like this at the top also. And so to me, I am a type A personality. I'm very particular, and sometimes I spend more time picking it apart and making it perfect than I should, because there's really no perfection as far as when you're a fiber artist. Sometimes something happens and it looks pretty good, so you leave it be. It's hard for me to do that. So as a Diné woman, I would say foremost that I am a mother and a grandmother, a wife, an aunt, a sister, and a friend. And I'm also a storyteller. I write books. I do the illustrations. And so people sometimes ask me, how are you inspired doing your art? And I just say, well, our heart and soul goes into whatever art we choose to practice. And so part of that creation process involves life experience, really. All the pain that I've had in my life, all the sorrow, all the fear, all the happiness, all of that just kind of converges into what I want to do, what I want to create, the expression of our human existence. So basically, if you want to come up and look at some of these, I have a lot of weaving tools. My mother would weave, and my father made the tools for her. These are the tools that my father made for my mother. And I don't use them. I cherish them too much. I don't want to break them or have anything happen to them. So I just look at them and I just think, these are the things that my father made out of love for my mother, and his hands touched them. And so they're very special to me. And he did the same thing with the weaving combs. It is, this is how you hold it. And as you start at the bottom, you have lots of room. So you start with like your wider battens. And this is a pretty wide batten. I did not use it on this one because this is a pretty small rug. If I had a rug that was quite large, like the size of the screen, then I would use the big battens. And then you continue going down. Right now, I am at this stage right here. This is what I'm using as my batten going through here. And it gets smaller and smaller. As you can see, you end up here. By the time you're about an inch left of weaving, the only thing that can fit through are these little tools. You add your yarn here and you pass it through. Okay, so the last part of the weaving process is probably. Oh, thank you. Yeah, yeah. So it takes a lot of work. I don't know how I'm going to demonstrate my weaving. Because you can't really.
What kind of wood do you think that is?
This?
No.
Oh.
Long sticks, because they're so smooth and light.
Oh, these? Different kinds of wood. Sometimes from the pinon tree, sometimes from pine. I know some of the ones that I've sent away and have made for me are from oak. Some of them are oak. Some of them are. I had a friend that was traveling in South America, and she brought back this one for me, which was wonderful, somewhere from the rainforest. You know, so that is really. It looks pretty wicked, but it's good. So also your combs. You start at the bottom of your weaving project with heavier combs, like these. And you can tell the difference depending what kind of wood it is. Mm-hmm. Oh. See how light that is compared to that one?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it just depends on the kind of wood that is used. And as you get further and further, getting towards the end of your rug, you have to start getting smaller and smaller combs to fit your weft. So it goes from large to small. And questions? Anything? Yes.
As you're weaving and using the comb,
Mm-hmm.
do you do like a row or a couple rows, and then you use your comb to kind of take out any space that's there, and you then
You create bubbles, or what I call bubbles.
Okay.
So let me tighten up so I can kind of demonstrate, even though I'm going to be in the way.
What do you use for weft? I mean for
Warp.
warp.
This is wool, but it's spun really, really fine. So let me get my. So the male doesn't do much work. It's just there. Okay, that's men. Okay, the female does all the work. Okay, so I will put my. Okay, let's see. All right, just a second. Okay, so put it here, and then you open it, and then I'm going to be going back the right direction. Let me find the comb that I use. Is that it? No, it's this one. Okay, so I start on the right side. My finger goes through. I catch it with my finger. And then there's the first part. Second part, same thing. Okay. When I was first starting to weave, I was not very patient with myself, and I was making a lot of mistakes. And I was thinking, there's no way I'm going to get this. It's been too long, because I worked as a nurse for a long time. I didn't have time to pursue weaving or some of those things, and I wasn't sure if I could remember the technique. But interestingly enough, it all came back to me, but I still had a difficult time. One time I couldn't figure something out, and I was very upset, so I went to bed, and I dreamed that my mother came to me. and she scolded me. She said, "You're supposed to enjoy the weaving process. It's not meant to be, this is not your nursing job," she says, "where everything has to be just so." She says, "Just enjoy the process." And when I woke up, and she showed me how to correct the mistake that I made that was making me angry. And so when I woke up, I went to the rug and I fixed it. And so that was my experience with my mom coming to me in a dream. Ooh. And I have a lot of cheaters. Let me see. Where's my box? Things that my mother and my grandmother did not have or use. It's just all about efficiency. So for me, I have all my tools in here. I've got my measuring. I measure so I don't start going in like an hourglass. You have to stay, your attention has to be, it's got to be the same. So I measure every once in a while to make sure I'm staying on course. And these little clippies are wonderful, these little hair thingies. Oh! Because what happens is sometimes you need to keep these two like that so that they don't move, okay? Because otherwise sometimes they slide down. Okay, so that's for that. And then I also have a little fuzz buster. Because sometimes, you know, it just kind of gets a little too fuzzy and I just kind of have to go along and, yeah, so that works really well for me. And then sometimes when I need to tie something, these are surgical instruments that I saved from my nurse days, okay, and that I use. And it's really easy to grab something, and I can tie something really quickly using the Kelly clamps. And I've got little scissors in here. I've got some more of these twisty thingies. And, of course, my little cheater glasses in case I can't see something. And most importantly, I have my headlamp. Okay, sometimes when I'm weaving, it gets dark and I want to be able to continue. And I usually have a lamp hanging right up here that I clamp so I can look down. But sometimes I use this instead. So I've got lots of goodies in here. Towards the end, you need sacking needles. I've got single edge razor blades sometimes. And with the wool, when you're using yarn, you have to unravel it like this before you pull. Okay, so that leaves a little bit of a tail, because if you just pull like this, it's going to be a blunt, and you can't weave it into the rug really well. So that's what we do. So anyway, so I just make the bubbles like that, get my comb, and start. Okay, and then I continue the process. And sometimes I cheat. And I use this little gadget here, which I absolutely love, because that works as my fingers for me. And it goes through, and I can pull it through. Then I make the bubbles again. Same with this side. And this tool has become very useful for me because unfortunately my fingers are starting to become arthritic, and it's hard for me to stick my fingers all the way across. So this tool does that for me.
You're working harder or smarter than further.
Yeah, exactly. So go across here and make sure that it's not too tight. Like I said, otherwise it's going to start becoming like an hourglass. And that is really hard to correct. Oops, see, I missed a section right there, I can tell. Okay, so one end of it is just a little stick, and the other end's a fork. So I can undo it 4. I missed a couple of strands. And the more you weave, you can pick up your mistakes pretty quickly. I mean, I just looked at it and I could see that I had missed. And so, correct it now. Yep, that looks good. And you never leave your tools in, and your tools, you have to take care of them. You don't drop them. You don't scratch your head. You don't, these are an extension of you when you're weaving, okay? Becomes part of your hand. It becomes part of your makeup. So you have to always care for them. And for me to carry them around, I made a little carrying thing that I use. I can find it. Oh. I used some of my husband's old jeans and use one leg. And I can put all my tools in there and they stay nice and protected. And then I can, go wherever I need to demonstrate or whatever. So anyway, I have my Sunflower Girl books if any of you would like to have one. It's $20 and it's usually $25, but that was for shipping if we needed to ship, but you're all here, so anyway, that's it. Questions? Any more questions? Yes.
So you're putting the black behind the fabric behind so you can see better.
Exactly, because in my weaving studio, my window is right there, and sometimes the sun comes through and it blinds me, so this black fabric helps concentrate, so I can see the work. Yeah. Otherwise it's just you're seeing through, and you can't really tell. Yes.
How long does it usually take you to weave something just that little?
I don't have a time limit. It's just when I feel like it. I don't do consignments. I mean, I don't. People say, "Well, can you weave me a rug?" And I said, as long as you give me as much time as I want and need. I don't want to be limited to, I want to have it by next month or in a couple of months, because to me, then you lose the creative source, because you're looking at the clock and you're thinking, okay, this has got to be done. And I don't like that. That's not the reason why I'm a fiber artist. So I would say if I was weaving, okay, let's say 8 hours a day, and took just enough time for breaks and stuff, I could probably do this in 3 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah. So, if all my yarn and everything was all prepped and everything was all ready, and all I had to do was sit down, and do that. But the preparation is what takes a lot of time also. So if you add that to and so that's why you think, why are blankets so expensive? Because it takes a lot of work and a lot of effort and so much preparation. So, yes.
I heard that in Indian rugs there was always a place for it to get out or something. The design. And I don't know.
Again, my mother never did that. So I think it just depends on what region you're from, and again, with oral tradition and what's taught to you, you kind of just go with whatever your mother, your grandmother said, did. So I don't ever remember my mother saying I needed to leave a mistake or a way out, because that would have driven me mad, the way I am. And I don't know how I became this way, being type A, because I just, who knows? Maybe I've just lived in the English society for too long. Could be. Yeah.
Probably.
Yes.
Is there a difference between a rug and a blanket? How is that?
The blanket we usually refer to as like a horse blanket, and they're thicker and it's more coarse, whereas this one, the textiles are finer.
In the rugs, they're finer than the blankets?
The blankets are coarser than the rugs. Yeah.
How many years were you in the boarding school?
I was in the boarding school for 3 years. And then the Mormon missionaries found me, and that's a whole nother story. It's just too long. Okay, too long. So anyway, okay, yes.
You know, Ginny, this just brings back a lot of memories, but I was also a nurse, and I was doing had a project because one of my professors was she was a nursing anthropologist who taught transcultural nursing.
Uh-huh.
And one of the projects we looked at, I think it was in the late 1970s,
Okay.
the NIH finally funded some projects
Okay.
where they had some of the Navajo young men that would apprentice with the medicine men because they didn't want to see all of the traditions just die. And I was working on a project back in Iowa.
Uh-huh.
And unbeknownst to me, I wound up moving to Arizona, and I lived there for 35 years.
Where in Arizona?
I was down in the southwest corner, so I wound up working with, I had some of my Kokapa and Hashan patients at that point, but there's so much of it that we have this great, big, beautiful world, but I think we really need to look at, there's so many other cultures, they have their own way of looking at life, that it's not just ours is the best. And it helped a lot to be able to take a look at it.
Yeah.
Because we moved to Arizona, from there to Utah, and it really is. Every morning I wake up and I look at the mountains, I look at the sky, I look at so much more inspiration. And, one of the questions I had, because I'm a knitter, is do they have any other, is everybody just carding their own wool? Or have there been any other industries that they work with after they shear the sheep? Are there any other companies that do any of it, like more of a commercial process?
I'm sure there are now, but when I was growing up, it was a family project. I mean, the aunties came, and my mother's sisters, and we all just processed the wool together because, a lot of hands make the work a little bit easier. And the men help us with the shearing because, the sheep could be kind of unruly sometimes, and they would kick and so forth. So, okay. All right. Well, thank you for allowing me to come. Yes, one more question.
I recently watched a documentary about Navajo weaving done by Anglos, and it said that the weaving really only started in the 18th or 19th century. Is that accurate? That 400 years ago now?
Okay, so now you have to remember that who writes those books are the Anglos, okay? The anthropologists, all those people. Now we have a lot of our own doctorates, Navajo people, that talk about our culture. And for us, like I said, I know we're grouped into maybe the Pueblos helped them start weaving, No, we've always known weaving. Maybe the Spaniards brought the sheep, And so there's just a lot of things that they throw in. And for me, I just still believe in our oral history, which is we've always had the gift of weaving. It was given to us by the holy people. We've always had sheep. Maybe not all the different kinds of sheep, but we always had sheep. So again, I don't know if that answers your question or what, but it just depends on perspective. I mean, they always accused us of being cultural borrowers too, which is really upsetting to me because, we see something, we improve it. Is that borrowing culture? Is it, I don't think so.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes, one more question.
Can you explain about your belt?
My belt.
Because I see them all the time.
Yeah.
And they're always red, white, and green, or?
There's different colors, but this is basically the color that most of them are woven. And it's a woman's belt, and it's usually given to you when you have your puberty ceremony, which is a kinalda, and you're dressed up in your native regalia, and so this can be used not only to dress yourself, but I remember my grandmother saying that when a woman is going through childbirth, sometimes you need something to hang on to. And so this is where the belt comes in handy, is that you're able to My grandmother would loop it around a branch where my mother could be able to hold on to, and every time a contraction hit, she would have some support, and that's what. So it has multiple uses.
Do they always have the same pattern, or no?
It's this on one side, and the other side is just reverse. Yeah. So.
Oh, cool.
I have one, but I've never figured out how to wear it. And I've been looking at yours, and there's no knots, there's no nothing.
Oh, there is. It's kind of, I really need help putting it on, but my husband was my only helper, and he's not very good at, So this, let me just take it off so I can show you. So, okay, so the two, this, I take 3 strands from the top, and 3 strands from the top here. And then when I put it around me, this goes right here and it goes over. And I hold it there. The other 3 straps, and this is where you tie it back there, and then you tuck it inside. And the same on the bottom. You take the first 3 straps on the bottom, wrap it around you, and tuck it under.
It makes it nice and smooth when you're
wearing
it.
Yes. So that's how you wear the belt. So I'm just going to take it off.
Thank you, Ginny. We've learned a lot.
No, it's okay. Thank you.
We appreciate you coming out, and hope you'll come for our next
thank you.
3rd weekend event. It'll be Christmas oriented.
I wanted to tell you too, I lived in Cedar Ridge for 6.5 months. How close would I have been to where you live?
Cedar Ridge.
By Gap, Highway 89.
Oh, we're quite a ways away. We're more towards Monument Valley.
Okay.
Yeah, from where I grew up, I could look and see Monument Valley.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I lived